All right, so this is the time that we call the Afterburn. If you have comments or questions, we'd ask you to come up in the seats up here in the front. It'll be easier than bringing the mic around, so if you can take your time here to go ahead and come up to the front seats. We have a microphone up there. If you're on the live stream, you can go ahead and submit your questions to Kurt and Rob, who are manning the live stream desk. I really want us to get this. I want us to truly embrace this. I want us to understand this because Yeshua, this is his big prayer at the end. And I really believe he's praying for the apostles, absolutely. But I think he's praying for anybody that would fit into that description. Hopefully that's us. Hopefully that's us. I mean, that's the whole point, aren't we also wanting the everlasting life that he talks about? Isn't that the whole point? I mean, you wouldn't be, here if he was offering you just like like some sort of prize in a box of the, Cracker Jacks or something, You would not turn over your whole life, move from wherever you lived, do all the things you did just for what? You wouldn't do it for enough money. You wouldn't do it for enough anything. What would you do it for? Eternal life. You want peace. You want shalom. You want answers. You want to understand. And you want your life to mean something. You want to understand why you're here. All those things. That's why you're doing all this stuff. Okay. So much to my surprise, Janet is up here to ask a question. And I'm not picking on Janet because if you have questions, you should ask them, and she does.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
So patient with me always. Rabbi, chapter 17, verse 9, when Yeshua said, I pray for them, I do not pray for the world, but for those whom you have given me, for they are yours. So should we also be praying? I mean, we also pray for our mispocha, but I also pray for the people who are not in covenant. So can you help me understand how to maybe reframe my prayers to honor him?
I mean, look, I don't think that, and when I was talking about here in verse 9, that, when Yeshua says, I'm not praying for the world, but I'm praying for them, part of what he's saying is this particular prayer is for these guys. But I think it also has to do with, something that's come up at issue. I think it's good that we pray for everybody. That's fine. But also understand that they may be going through something because it's exactly what the Father had planned for them. And so we have to package our prayer in such a way that it expresses, Father, whatever it is you're doing that maybe they're supposed to see or receive out of this, I don't want to pray against that. But I love the person. They're my friend, they're a family member, they're a coworker. I have compassion. I have, it's hurting my heart to see them suffer, and I wanted to come before you and ask you to intervene. Okay? But recognize that at the same time, you should be asking him to do it in such a way that demonstrates that it's from him. That there should be no doubt that it's him. It shouldn't just be, okay, so they recovered. But let it be in such a way that they can't argue where the source was. Okay? But they may be coming from a religious background where they would give God, quote unquote, the glory and honor, and it still wouldn't help them get closer to the truth than they were before. Because they'll still think it was the God in the context of whatever they understand. So we don't know how he's doing what he's doing. We don't understand the depths of the wisdom of the nuances of all the things that he's doing with everybody. But when we pray, what we're demonstrating is our compassion and our love for those. And that's good. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't pray for others, but understand that the world has to go through what it goes through. Okay? So when people try to get me wrapped up in, well, the big vote that's happening in the Knesset in Israel is going to realize, look, I'm going to get in all kinds of trouble here. I don't care. I mean, I have zero caring for what's happening in the Knesset in Israel. That's not because I don't like Israel, and I'm Jewish and everything else, but that's ground zero for what Zechariah is describing. when all the armies of the world are going to come against Jerusalem. Do you think that's not going to happen? I just observe what's happening there, because as it plays out, it gives me a little bit of a sense, possibly. At the moment, I haven't learned anything watching it for the last 50 years, but at some point I'm expecting to see something that gives me a sense of where we are prophetically. And I know everybody sees everything they want to see every day in what happens in Israel prophetically. I choose not to say that, because there's so many things that happen and they don't, and they happen and they don't, and they happen and they don't. So I'm doing what Scripture wants me to do, as far as I understand, which is I watch. Okay? But I don't get emotionally involved. Okay? So I'm not a Zionist. You got a lot of Christians out there that are just in love with Israel, but they have no interest in the covenant. They really don't, but they love Israel for whatever reason. The Israel right now is a political entity put together by the governments of the world. That is not what Yah put together. But he allowed it to be put together because in 1948, it needed to be there as things started to develop and play out, so that it would be there for the end time things to happen. Because the end time things happen to Israel. Didn't exist for a long time. So it had to exist. So therefore, it is part of his plan that it exists. That doesn't mean, like when people say, they used to do this every time we had prayer time. Oh, don't forget we have to pray for Jerusalem. That prayer is not about this Jerusalem. It's talking about a Jerusalem that's in covenant, or the Jerusalem that's coming. It's not talking about this Jerusalem. This Jerusalem is a disaster. How they ever allowed the state to be put together without Jerusalem being completely whole makes no sense. Except that man did it. That shows you Yah didn't do it. To have the Temple Mount divided and all the other things split up between the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews, and all the other craziness, Yah didn't do that. He allowed it, though. He absolutely allowed it. You understand what I'm saying? So, absolutely, we should be demonstrating our heart. My mother, who's recently a secular Jew, we'll call her, she's culturally Jewish. She still goes to temple. She does what she needs to do to go to the synagogue, etc. From time to time, she doesn't keep the Sabbath generally. She doesn't all the other things. But she's noticed over time that when people that she knows, as she's getting older, she's 80 now, she has friends that are getting into health challenges, she'll ask us to pray for her friends, and she's seen that it's worked. And it's witnessed. And then her friends ask her to have us pray for them. And so there's a witness to that, okay? So understand when you're praying that you just want to be aware, I don't want to pray against what the Father's doing, but I do want to pray for the fact that I care about the ones I'm praying for, and that it would be a witness too. So I pray because my mother and her rabbi's wife have asked us to pray. Now, she has passed away, the rabbi's wife and the rabbi at this point. But when they were alive, they have asked my mother to ask me to pray for certain things. That's a witness. If they're going to ask, I'm going to pray. Does that make sense? But you have to remember, the world is going where it's going, and what's going to happen is going to happen, and the book tells us, and either you believe it or you don't. I choose to believe the book. I believe you do too. And so hopefully that's the right answer to this whole prayer question, okay? So if you want to, when people ask prayer for friends and coworkers and everything, I never stop them from doing that. Just understand, from my mindset, it's about we're showing how much we care about them and desire that they may witness the miracle that draws them to wake up a little bit. But it's not the miracle that will wake them up. They can have millions of miracles and not wake up. Look at all the Israelites that died in the desert after all the miracles. It didn't wake them up. Okay? 603,000 men over 20 years old. And they saw all those miracles. They didn't wake up. He has to draw them. So it's not enough to say, well, heal them and that somehow it's going to change everything. It doesn't necessarily work that way. Okay? All right, who's next?
This may be common knowledge for a lot of people in this room, but I had a little mini revelation sitting there a few minutes ago. And many times as you're teaching, scriptures will just fly in my mind and I'll have a clear understanding. Well, today, you know the scripture that says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, then we'll hear from heaven and we'll heal their land. I always, for years, I would say, if my people who are called by my name, I'd think, what are we to call ourselves? Before I knew I was Israel, are we to call ourselves Yahwists, Yahwehans? You know what I mean? And I would play all these names in my mind.
Sure.
It just hit me. If my people who will humble themselves and pray, no, wait.
Who are called by my name.
Who are called by my authority.
Right.
Who are called by his authority.
Yes.
Then will I hear from heaven. It just, I don't know, it was revelatory to me.
I like that.
It
I
might
like that
be
a lot.
other people already knew that, and duh.
Yeah,
but
that's great.
For me, it was like revelation.
Amen. Amen. That was actually very good. Okay, you can come on up and make it easier for the camera. We'll just kind of get people back over here. Very well said, Maureen. Appreciate that.
Okay, this is
Okay, you guys are going to have to really put that mic almost in your mouth. Bring it
Okay.
right up there.
this is 17. Let's see. Let's go 6 through 7. Yeshua revealed your name to the men whom he gave him. So he revealed the Father to him.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes on to say that you gave them to me, they have guarded your word. Well, as Yeshua, as I understand it, he's the walking, talking, living Torah. They have guarded me. So you were talking about the vertical alignment of receiving esteem, how if you are our rabbi and you are teaching us and we reflect it to the Father, it brings esteem to you. So according to this, they have guarded your word. So you have guarded me, which reflects it to the Father. He sent it to him through Yeshua.
Mm-hmm.
So Yeshua gets esteem from that.
Amen.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well put. Well put. All right, Kirk.
All right, I'm asking this on behalf of somebody else in the congregation. They're concerned that maybe you could speak more on guarding the Torah and His Word as opposed to keeping it, and what that looks like. More detail on that. They're afraid they're not doing enough to guard it.
Okay, I mean, look, it's keeping the Torah. It means you're observing. In other words, I'm just using it in sort of the modern way that we would say things. You know, when you're keeping it, okay, so you're here. Okay, but you could be here and skip services. You could be here and just be kind of going to meals and enjoying some of the activities. Or you could be here to try to work on your relationship with the body and with the Father and the Son. This is a way of doing that. So you're guarding to a certain degree. This is a holy day. I know some of you are thinking this is a great vacation, but this is a holy day. Are you still treating it like a holy day? Okay? We were on another property and people were going over to the Starbucks and getting coffee on the holy day. Okay? Because there was a Starbucks on the property. I mean, are you guarding the day? Okay? And so guarding comes up when there's a temptation to do something that is unauthorized. Okay? So there's a temptation not to do something that is required. Remember, the Torah is divided into the positive and the negative commands. These things are required and expected, the positive commands. These things are unauthorized and you're expected not to do them. They are not approved behaviors. And so you have this combination of things. So we are to be aware, to guard is to be aware of those moments where we might forget to do something required, neglect to do something required, or we are tempted to do something that is inappropriate. Hopefully that answers the question. But as far as keeping Torah, yeah, you know, in a sense, you could say, look, a lot of people say they're Sabbath keepers. It seems to be a wide variety of flavors of what that looks like, okay? Now, some of them mean, well, I go to services on Saturday, but then they still treat it like a Sunday keeper does, and so they go shopping after services or do whatever else they do. Look, when I was in a church situation, it was a Torah-keeping church, but they all went out to lunch right after services. And then they got mad at me and my wife when we said we don't go to restaurants on Shabbat. Oh, you're judging us. We're Sabbath keepers. No, that's true. You're Sabbath keepers. You're not Sabbath guarders. Okay? Maybe that's the difference right there. Well, we go to restaurants. Okay, that's your choice. All right? Did you have a clarification you wanted to ask?
Something like yesterday, being submitted to you, you were able to correct me because I was just doing window shopping over there. So something about being submitted to a greater authority too, to keep you in line, if that helps.
Amen.
So, yeah.
Amen. Okay, so like when we had the marketplace open and then it turned to Shabbat, okay, or turned to the holy day, and I said, because people were still checking in yesterday, and I tell them, I said, look, shut it all down, get people away from it. Window shopping's not even appropriate. Okay, you don't need to be over there thinking about the things you want to buy on Shabbat. And so we covered it up eventually with some tablecloths. But I first blocked it, they blocked it off. Somebody had the idea to block it off with chairs and everything. I'd get people away. But some people looked at me like, well, I was just looking. I understand that. But why do you need to be looking today? Well, because you're keeping, not guarding. So we almost needed to think about it like a guard there to block the tables. You don't need to come over here and look at this stuff that's, go after the glittery, shiny stuff. I want to go look at it. It's fun and I'm curious. And are you guarding or are you being drawn off according to the flesh? The flesh wanted to see the stuff. Oh, look, they've got hoodies now and coffee mugs, and I want to see the new coin. And plenty of time for that when it's not a holy day, when it's not Shabbat. So I told them, cover it up. Now, they weren't thinking of actually buying it. I know that. But why are we even window shopping on Shabbat? You're still getting your mind wrapped around what you want. I want. Instead of what he wants. Okay? So close it up. I mean, I almost didn't want to mention the marketplace at all during the announcements because it is a holy day, but I wanted you to know, yes, that stuff will be available to you, just not on holy days. Okay? Because people are all excited about it, interested in it. I don't want anybody peeking under the curtain, so to speak, to just figure out what's on the table. It'll all be open to you when it's not a holy day. So hopefully that explains the difference a little bit between guarding and keeping, okay? If you're home, because a lot of you don't have a place to go to keep Shabbat, so you're home. It's harder at home. Sure, you're watching live stream or whatever, but a lot of you are watching live stream, in your pajamas. You didn't really turn it into a holy day like you would be coming. And, you're running back and forth and snacking all through the thing, which is totally fine. Or if you're home, you might be deciding to watch a game or watch a movie or do things that are secular in nature because you've got a lot of time to kill. Are you thinking, is this appropriate in my observance of the time? Am I guarding it? I'll give you an example in my life with my wife. My wife is, as you all probably know, a photography person. She loves pictures. She went on a trip to France a few years back. Somebody actually took her on a trip to France when we were married, and a friend in the congregation back then took her to France. So you can imagine she came back with 4,000 pictures. And we were visiting her family down in Florida, and her sister came over, one of her sisters came over, and it was Shabbat. And I said, I'd love to see your pictures. Now, it was probably about 2 hours before sundown. We had just had dinner. Okay, we were sitting there as a family. It was Shabbat. We had a nice little meal real quickly, and it was the end of the day, but there still was 2 hours left probably. And I looked at her and I said, I just gave a little head shake and put my hand out. I said, no, let's wait till after sundown. And so she told her sister that, who got very upset with us. She was very offended, like, what? What's the big deal? Blah, blah, blah. Because I know once you open those pictures, all you're going to be talking about is France, Paris, and everything else. You've totally ended Shabbat. You see? That's not guarding Shabbat. I mean, is it doing work? No. but it's doing your pleasure. It's going to distract you from the vertical. And what's the big rush? You can't guard for another 2 hours? It wasn't like I was asking you to wait a month to look at the pictures. It might not even have been 2 hours. It wasn't that long, but I said, let's just wait. Now, to my wife's credit, I don't know if she would have done it or not, but she right away said, my husband said no. She submitted right there. I can't say she was going to break or anything. She probably would have said no on her own, but I had already, right away when I heard it, said no. Which also, by the way, protected her from her sister, because now it's my fault. Anybody who's an in-law, might as well be my fault, right? Right? Husbands, protect your wives with you take the blame for it all. They're going to blame you anyway. Even if she had said it, oh, your husband won't let you do that? Okay. Trust me when I tell you, my wife thinks for herself, okay? All right? She thinks for herself. Now, she's submissive to me, but she thinks for herself. But I'm just giving you an understanding. That's the difference in guarding. Some of you would have been like, oh, what's the big deal? We'll show my sister my pictures. I don't know why so many of you are posting on Shabbat. Things from the week, things from this. Why are you posting stuff on Shabbat? Why are you on Facebook on Shabbat? No need to be on Facebook on Shabbat. Why would you be on social media? Listen, I'm not on Facebook like ever. Okay? You go look at my Facebook page. The last thing I posted, I think, was in August. That's because I was trying to keep up with my page and I just gave up. I probably have 3,000 friend requests that are just still waiting. I don't understand the obsession. But we are to guard, which means that we should be, this is the big problem. Are you consciously aware of where you are situationally? This is a big problem, okay? We're going to talk about this in the classes that I'm going to be doing later in the week. Do you have an appropriate level of situational awareness? It's something I try to teach my children all the time. Situational awareness. There's a certain awareness you must have to understand that the situation at services is different than the situation at work, is different than the situation at home, is different than the situation with your friends. I mean, what is the appropriate behavior in a particular place and time of what's going on? And so we lack that terribly. And you're not going to do a good job of guarding if you're not really conscious in your awareness of the situation and what's appropriate and not appropriate. If you're not consciously thinking about, is this appropriate right now? We don't even ask the question. That's why we make the wrong answers. We just respond and react and just do stuff instead of asking, is this okay? You don't have to, and by the way, by asking doesn't mean you have to call somebody and ask. You have to at least ask yourself, so at least you're aware. I wonder if I should be doing this right now. I wonder if there's something I should be doing that I'm not doing right now. My first prayer to Yahweh when I was keeping nothing, had no relationship with nothing, was, if there's something, I just said, if you exist, you got to show me. That was question one. Question two, and if there's stuff I'm supposed to be doing or stuff I'm supposed to not be doing, you need to show me because I don't know. But I had to start off with the question. I want to know if there's something I'm supposed to be doing or something I'm not supposed to be doing. Well, you should be asking that all the time in everything that you're doing. I wonder if this is what I should be doing right now. By the way, it's not just about Torah observance. There's a lot of times when we're goofing off and we're supposed to be being responsible for something or doing some sort of project or getting some task done or whatever. We are not aware a lot of times, is this the thing that's appropriate to do right now? Appropriate doesn't always have anything to do with Torah observance. But when you're talking about Shabbat, when you're talking about when you're eating food, when you're shopping in the store, do you even bother to read the labels? Or do you just look at it real quick and, Because I know a bunch of people that have shown up at our services who've missed things on labels. And we've had to tell them, I'm sorry, don't be offended, but we can't serve this. And they'll say, but I looked at the label. Well, apparently not as good as you should have. Because it's not that they didn't know that ingredient was a problem, they just didn't see it. Are you diligent? That's guarding, okay? Taking the time to put in the diligence in what you're doing, okay? That's a long-winded answer, but I think it was important. All right, who's next? Go ahead, live stream.
Okay, from the Klein family, it says, Rabbi, John 17:4 So is Yeshua saying he's accomplished his flesh walk example of the way, saying it is finished for the people now to esteem his Father as he did?
Say it one more time.
So is Yeshua saying he's accomplished his flesh walk example of the way, saying it is finished for the people now to esteem his Father as he did?
I would agree generally in what you just said. I mean, yes, he was saying this part of what I was sent to do, this phase in my journey, I've accomplished what you sent me to do, yes, the flesh walk. But I think he's been trying to point them to the Father even before he finished the journey. And all of the conversations he had was always to try to point people in the direction above. So I don't think he was saying from this point forward now we need to now focus on the Father. He always wanted them to focus on the Father all through his ministry, all of his conversations. So I would agree partially with what you said. Of course, that's assuming I understood it correctly. So, and that happens a lot. Sometimes I don't always understand the question correctly, but what else?
From Evangeline says, how then shall we react when testimonies from quote unquote answered prayers were positive or favors granted and they say it was heard by whomever they were praying to?
Look, you don't have to react in any kind of way. I know a lot of you were healed in churches, experienced deliverances out of bad lifestyles in churches. There was all kinds of good things that happened to you on your journey in a place that wasn't an end point. It was a transitional point, okay? And most of you transitioned through the church. And so be happy that it happened. Someone comes to me and says, it's a miracle I was healed. Jesus healed me. I'm like, I'm glad you're healed. Okay? I'm not going to address how they got healed. I'm just be happy for them. They're healed. Abba allowed it. He may not have caused it, but he certainly allowed it. He may have caused it, by the way. Why? He may have needed them healed so they would be healed later for when he's ready to open their eyes, where if he didn't heal them, they might have died, and then he wouldn't have the time to open their eyes. We don't know what he did, but he certainly allowed it, okay? And I think we can certainly rejoice with someone who was healed. Don't be frustrated by the fact that it's doing what it's supposed to do, which is miracles are designed to lock you into something. And so if they become more locked into that system because of that miracle, it is what it is. But Yahweh allowed it. Okay, so I'm not worried about it. See, you got to remember, we go back to the sort of the color code stuff. All of you blue personality people, you get really frustrated with all this stuff because you get emotionally involved, okay? And you got to let that stuff go. Doesn't matter to me how. I've had people telling me, well, I was at a Benny Hinn thing when I was 18 and I got healed from this or that. I'm like, I'm glad. Well, what healed me? I don't know. I don't care. But I need to know. Why? Because I'm blue. Just be happy you're healed. And know that at the very minimum, he allowed it. Even if he didn't cause it, even if it was caused by whatever wrong source or whatever you want to think might have done it, who cares? You're healed. Okay, you did it where you were at that time. Now, if you were to go to those type of sources now, that would be a problem. Like when Saul went to the witch. Okay? So if you said, wow, I remember I went to this one person when I was in this other system and I got healed, let me go back there again for another healing. Now you've got a different problem. It happened when you were where you were, and he allowed it because of where you were at that time. You should not allow it, though, Deuteronomy 13, right? Don't allow it to endorse that which leads you away from Torah. Just be happy it happened. You have no idea. People tell me, I was a drug addict, I was a prostitute, I stole, I murdered, and when I came to Jesus, I got healed of all that stuff. I'm glad that happened. They're no longer being a harm to themselves or other people. I'm also glad that they're now learning that there's a difference between that and Yeshua. I'm glad that they're now learning that there's a right way to go about things. But you know what? Had they not been pulled out of that, they may never have been around. They'd be in jail somewhere or dead or something. So now they were here for this. You understand where I'm going with this? If you follow that? Okay? So, but we are so Gnostic. But I need to know. No, you don't. Exactly. Someone else said that. You don't. You don't need to know. What do you need to do? Trust. Okay? You don't need to know, you need to trust. What is trust? What is faith? It's the evidence that you can't see. You have evidence, but you don't understand it. But you're believing it anyway. How do you believe, as Yeshua would say? How can you love what you don't see if you can't love what you do see? How do we go through that process? It's challenging. So what you need is trust. What you need is faith. What you need is emunah. That's what you need. I am just happy you were healed. You should be happy too. Move on. Now get about your Father's business. Don't be distracted by all that. All right? Okay, next question.
All right, shalom to our Nasi.
Shalom.
I have I've been thinking about when we were in verse 8, and pardon my voice, it's a little rough today. Mm-hmm. So I've been thinking about when we were verse 8 and how often in the scriptures the word received is used to communicate ideas of welcoming, like receive them into your homes, things like that. And when you were talking about verse 8 and saying what a beautiful picture of discipleship that is, and I think that's so beautiful for us to think about how well this worked because they welcomed what he gave them. How different this would look if it read, because the words which you gave to me, I've given to them, and they have sat aside and coldly analyzed and decided for themselves whether or not to accept what I teach. That probably would have ended differently. So I just
that would have probably been I do not pray for these.
So I just think that's good for all of us here to think about and say, do you have a place where you fit into that in that receiving? Do you have that relationship with somebody, like we were talking about relationship? It's very, very important to have that and to be part of that Matthew 18 process, not the one at the end of the chapter that everybody always bungles, but the one at the beginning where he says, unless you repent and become as little children, you shall by no means enter into the kingdom. And if you see a little child wandering around without a daddy or a mama or something like that, there's a problem, right? So it's just something really beautiful to think about. And I'm so glad that you spent some time on that and focused on it.
Amen. Thank you, Raymond. Appreciate that. And by the way, for those of you out there, you may hear some people refer to me as Rabbi. You'll hear others refer to me as Nasi. The Nasi was it's like the leader of leaders. It was the head of the Sanhedrin. It's like the president of the Sanhedrin. So it's an honorific. It's another type of title that some people may use with me. You might hear that. So in case you're wondering, what's that term? And there are those that, they still have reasons and challenges and, with the rabbi thing, and that's fine. But I really appreciate that they've chosen, in some ways, a more honoring title anyway, which is Nasi. So just so you understand that you may hear people refer to me that way. And so, since I am a leader of a group that has leaders within it, it's actually a very appropriate title. Okay, so I thought I would just take a chance to explain that. Okay, Olivier.
Hi, Rabbi. Question on John 17:1, and he said that Yeshua lifted his eyes up, and we're also talking about the above and the below.
You're going to have to put it right by your mouth.
Sorry, is it better?
That's better.
So John 17:1, Yeshua lifted his eyes up to the heaven, and we talked before about the above and the below. Mm-hmm. Could you clarify for me what the heaven means? What does lifting your eyes up mean?
Okay, I mean, look, good question. By the way, as you can tell from his accent, he's not from here, he's from Texas. He is from Texas. I'm making that up. Okay. I couldn't resist that one. It was just too easy a setup. Look, it's a perfect flow as he's giving these metaphors, where he also says the hour has not, the hour has come and that kind of thing. We have this idea that he understood, the Jewish community understood, of the above and the below. Okay? Because after all, whether the earth is round or flat, a triangle or a diamond or whatever it is, we stand on this surface and everything else is above us. Okay? Okay, because below us is solid. It's ground, it's earth, it's whatever, it's solid. No matter what you think of, it's solid. So we think about what's above. So he says he's lifting his eyes. In other words, that's where he looks for, that's where he looks towards, that's where he receives from. I'm lifting my eyes to the heavens. I'm looking up. Okay, because that's where we think of as all that he is and the Father is, now that they're together up there, wherever that up there is, whatever that, it's above. Okay? It's not a physical space that we say, well, if you make a left at Jupiter and then make a right over here at this star, it's not a place that has a location you can point to. It's just above, okay? All right? And so, does that answer the question? Okay? He's looking, so it's continuing the metaphor that they would have understood of, he lifted his eyes, he looked up, he lifted his eyes to the heaven being, that's where the source of everything is. Whatever that is, okay? All right, Anders. And Anders is not from Texas.
All right, Rabbi. My question is on chapter 17, verse 5. It says, "And now esteem me with yourself, Father, with the esteem which I had with you before the world was." So my question or thought came to the fact that he's not had this esteem since he created the world.
Well, what he was trying to refer to is, well, you know what? I think that might actually be right. I'm going to kind of rephrase that. And on some levels, there was a level of esteem before there was any existence. Okay? Then once there was existence, he, the Son, chose to interact with us on a different level. He's the one that ate with Abraham and met with Moses and did all of these things. And so, but he's talking about now I'm going to be restored to that place where I'm no longer going to be doing this interacting with man until he returns in glory and honor, King of Kings, etc., etc.
Yeah, and on verse 7, it said, "Now they come to know that all you gave to me is from you." And verse 4, "I have esteemed you on the earth, having accomplished the work you have given me that I should do." So he was supposed to reveal the Father from the beginning until the end. That's his whole purpose, to bring everything back to him. And then in the first verse, in the end of that, when it says, "Father, the hour has come, esteem your Son, so that your Son also might esteem you." So he's waiting for that. He wants to esteem him. That's all his desire. That's what caught my attention.
Amen. Amen. And that's a big part of the work he was here to accomplish, was to accomplish letting us know there's a Father. Okay? Because they apparently hadn't understood that. And he said, "I came to show you the Father." And the Jews all reacted with, "What are you talking about? We've always had a relationship with the Father." He's like, "No, you've had one with me, but there's more." Okay? And that's a whole sort of deal. And Anders is here all the way from Sweden. Which is slightly not next to Texas. Okay.
Excuse me, a little bit nervous, but don't you believe, wouldn't you agree that modern believers are at a unique disadvantage from the people of Israel that were coming out of the Exodus, in that they seen the miracles that Yahweh did, and yet they all fell in the desert? And about the subject of belief, our belief is strictly on belief, because we didn't see any of these miracles. We have to do it all on what we heard and what we read in the book and everything like that. Wouldn't you agree that we're kind of at a disadvantage from past believers?
No.
No?
Well, because now there's logic to what he's saying, okay? It sort of makes sense that we would have a disadvantage, but it doesn't actually play out that way because we actually have huge advantages that they didn't have. We get to read all of this stuff and see how it played out. And we get to see the examples, as Paul says, it was written as examples for us. Okay, they had a limited understanding of this. None of this stuff was written down for them. Moses writes it down. They'd been in, slavery for a period of time. And so here, yes, they saw these miracles, but you know what? They were seeing miracles in a very pagan world. They didn't know what to do with all that stuff. They didn't know what the context to do with all that stuff was. And they also have a disadvantage that we don't have is that they had to come out of a slavery mindset. Now, some of us still have sort of a slavery mindset simply because the world has enslaved us in so many different ways. But they had a literal slavery mindset. And now that they were set free, they didn't know what to do with themselves. Okay? So we have so much advantages, and they had other advantages. I think it's all equal to a certain degree. And you see, they fail just almost as much as we fail. Or vice versa. Sometimes we think they fail worse, sometimes we think we fail worse. But I don't think there's actually a real advantage. I think that it actually balances out. That's why I said no. I think on the logical, rational side, it first sounds very reasonable. Hey, they had more advantages than we did. Look at the people even with Yeshua. They're ones who walked with him that ended up saying, oh, nope, not for me. Okay? And it says, and however many just stopped walking with him. But they had the advantage. He was right there. Is it really an advantage? Yahweh calls you, we're going to talk about this also in the class, he calls you exactly at the right time.
That's all I have.
Okay, he calls you exactly the right time. But it's a great question. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay? He calls you at the right time. Where you are, when, how, everything exactly at the right time. Knowing fully that's a right starting point for you to do this. It may not make any sense to you, at least not initially, but looking back after a few years of it, you go, oh, I can see why that makes sense now. All right? Any more on the live stream?
A couple more. From Andy Dennis, it says, is guarding thing the same as when Yeshua asked the disciples to guard while he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane?
In a lot of ways, I would say that would be true, because what is he asking them to do? Be aware, pay attention, be awake. So a lot of it's the same. Okay, that's what you do when you guard. You're aware, you're awake, you're paying attention. You're prepared to handle whatever comes. That's another piece I guess I never really mentioned when I talk about guarding. To guard something takes training, takes preparation. You're not just going to grab somebody off the street and ask them to stand guard. You're going to run them through a program that trains them on how to guard. This is the schooling you're going through in learning to be Torah observant, to be covenanted, so that you can guard the commands, okay? Amen?
Be kind of along the lines of the hirelings that would flee if the danger came.
Right.
Tom Lasordo says, John 17:9 says, I pray for them, are the called put ones who Yahweh had opened their eyes and ears.
Let's say it one more time.
And John 17:9 says, I pray for them, are the called, I'm thinking it's the called out ones who Yahweh has opened their eyes and ears.
Yes. At this point, he's praying for them. Now, it's not that he's not praying also for those, that he wouldn't be wanting, having a heart for those that have not been called yet. But remember, right now, he's dealing with those that he's leaving behind. So really, in the Peshat, in the literal, he's not talking about us at all. Okay? In the Peshat, he's specifically talking about these guys I've trained, you've given them to me, they've guarded your word, and I'm about to go bye-bye, and I'm praying for them. So if we really want to look at this in a literal sense, he's not talking about us at all. Okay, he's not. He's talking about these guys, the ones I've trained, the ones you've given to me, the ones that were yours, and they've guarded your word, and now I'm going to go, and I want you to protect them. But I want you to protect them while they're in the world. I don't want you to take them out of the world, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that when people see them, it will witness. We're going to talk about that in the next part. That as they see them, they'll understand that you sent me and how they behave. All right, now, of course, we can extrapolate this out. Because it's a discipleship thing, I don't think it's wrong for us to say, Although this was for them, it's also for us. Because it was then instructed for them to duplicate this through discipleship. And so we really should be a fruit of that process. That through the ages, the discipling has brought it to here. And so this is a fruit of that. So it would apply to us from that point of view. Okay, so I think that that's an important aspect of this. Yes, absolutely. Now, when you talk about, there was something I was going to say also. When you talk, because somebody had mentioned it really briefly, when you mentioned about the hireling. When we talk about a guard, you really don't know what someone is made out of, whether they're really qualified to do something like guard, until there's a challenging moment when the enemy might show their face. Will they stand or will they flee? I'm sure this comes up a lot in military training. Will the people I've just trained handle it under fire? Well, that's the whole thing with you. In your life, a lot of you, anybody under fire? But are you guarding the commands when you're under fire? When your boss says to you, I need you to come in on Saturday, now you're under fire. Are you going to guard it? Grandma wants to serve you, bacon with your breakfast. Are you going to eat it? Whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? You're under fire. Oh, but you don't understand. She'll never talk to me again and this and that. Well, that's you're under fire. What are you going to do? As for me in my house type of thing, what are you going to do? Are you going to serve him? Are you going to guard the commands? But you know what? He's not. That's why we did the teaching on baptism of fire. Because I wanted you all speaking in tongues. No, I'm kidding. That's what it wasn't about. Okay? If you don't know what I'm talking about, listen to baptism of fire. Baptism of fire is what? It's the time that you are put under proving whether or not you're ready for what's coming. It's a testing. You're going to be under fire. Think about that kind of fire. You're under fire. You're under attack. You're being tested. You're in a challenge. Are you going to stand? Are you going to respond appropriately? Or are you going to, fold like a house of cards? Okay? Which is it going to be? Go listen to the baptism of fire. The fire is those little snap quizzes that come up to see how far you've grown. Okay, he says, I'm going to baptize you with water, with spirit, and with fire. Water is washing you clean so you have a good start. Spirit is I'm going to give you understanding and train you for what you need to do. And then fire is going to see, did you learn anything? How far have you come along? And then guess what? You start again. You repent, which is like the water. You get more instruction. You get another test to see if you come along further. That make sense? Okay, what's next? That's it. All right, awesome. Okay, so. Fantastic.